ACC Dissolution was discussed between Bubba Cunningham and the UNC Chancellor on the night of June 30th. So we're going to discuss this crazy theory again here on September 28th. And we're going to go through the updated poll projections by Brett McMurphy's Action Network, as we do that every single week, because everything is important here at Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Flugar. Welcome to episode 61. Please put your comments down in the comment section below the video. I read them all. Let me know what you agree with and disagree with. Give me your thoughts, and please smash the like button. It helps us so much with this YouTube channel. It helps us so much with the algorithm. Please smash the like button, subscribe to our channel, and please share the video with your family and friends. First, we're going to get to the poll projections. Then we're going to discuss the night of June 30th once again between Bubba Cunningham and UNC's Chancellor. Because let's talk about this. Once again, we need to talk about this. Let's try to connect the dots. And what would an ACC dissolution actually look like? Okay, first, let's get to the poll projections of Brett McMurphy. Real quick here. College football bowl projections for week 5. It's been updated. Let's get right to it. According to Action Network, their bowl projections: South Alabama Liberty to be determined bowl, Bahama Bowl, Florida Atlantic, Northern Illinois. Northern Illinois just lost a close big game last week. Marshall, San Jose State in the Duluth Trading Cure Bowl. North Carolina, Memphis in the Wasabi Fenway Bowl. North Carolina just lost a shootout to Notre Dame. Wyoming, Houston in the New Mexico Bowl. In the LA Bowl, Washington State and Air Force. I know Washington State Cougar fans are still thinking of something bigger for this season. Appalachian State versus Toledo in the Lending Tree Bowl. Arkansas and Oregon in the Las Vegas Bowl. Arkansas lost last Saturday, where the field goal hit the top of the goalpost. It's the difference between Las Vegas Bowl and possible Sugar Bowl, right? Just that missed kick that hit the top of the goalpost. Unbelievable. Oregon, Arkansas. This is a big bowl game. Don't let the date of the game fool you. Las Vegas Bowl, Arkansas, Oregon. That would be tremendous. Oregon still looking to get to the Rose Bowl, however. In the Frisco Bowl, Iowa State loses another close one to Baylor. Iowa State versus Boise State. In the Myrtle Beach Bowl, last week, if you remember, it was Coastal Carolina versus East Carolina. We have Middle Tennessee, who just upset Miami, Florida Hurricanes. Middle Tennessee versus East Carolina. In the Idaho Bowl, Potato Bowl, Miami, Ohio versus Fresno State. In the Boca Raton Bowl, Georgia Southern versus UAB. In the New Orleans Bowl, Western Kentucky versus Coastal Carolina. This is a change from last week. Coastal Carolina was in the Myrtle Beach. They move up to the New Orleans Bowl. In the Armed Forces Bowl, Texas versus SMU. Texas loses a big one last week. They drop down in the bowl rankings. Texas versus SMU. Army and Tulane in the Independence Bowl at Shreveport, Louisiana on December 23rd. We move here to the Gasparilla Bowl, Miami of Florida, who just lost to Middle Tennessee. They better get their season straightened out. They had dreams of winning their division, the ACC, to go to the ACC championship game, and they just got beat by Conference USA team Middle Tennessee. Wow. Miami of Florida versus Indiana. Indiana got a big game coming up against Nebraska. They need that fourth win to get to a bowl game. If they lose to Nebraska, I don't think the Hoosiers make this bowl game. We continue. The Hawaii Bowl. UNLV versus UTSA. In the Quick Lane Bowl, Rutgers versus Central Michigan. Again, Rutgers needs to get to 6 wins. They got 3 wins right now. Is there 3 wins left on the schedule? They got to get that quarterback position developed here fast for the remaining part of the season. Texas Tech, another big win last week. Texas Tech versus BYU in the First Responder Bowl. Texas Tech fans are still dreaming bigger. Louisville versus Purdue in the Birmingham Bowl. Wow, wouldn't this be something? Jeff Brom, alumni, Louisville, former quarterback, always rumored to be the next Louisville Cardinal head football coach. Purdue versus Louisville in the Birmingham Bowl. That would sell some tickets. Troy versus Ohio in Montgomery, Alabama. The Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Illinois versus Kansas State. Adrian Martinez would get another shot, another crack at Illinois. Kansas State with a huge win. Versus Oklahoma. I think Kansas State and Illinois are dreaming bigger right now. I can't blame the fans for dreaming bigger than the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, but that's where they're projected right now based upon Action Network. Brett McMurphy's reporting. The Military Bowl, Duke versus UCF. The Liberty Bowl, Kansas Jayhawks versus Auburn. I don't know if Auburn's going to make this bowl. They have to win this Saturday. Brian Harson's last game might be this Saturday. Kansas in the Liberty Bowl. They continue. Can they get to 6 wins? Oh, I definitely think they can. They're at 4 right now. Florida State, Oregon State, and the Holiday Bowl. Oregon State's 3-1. Florida State's 4-0. They're both having a great start of the season. Oregon State just lost a close one to USC. Florida State fans are dreaming bigger than the Holiday Bowl, but that's where it's projected right now. TCU, Mississippi State in the Texas Bowl. That would be a good game. The Pirate versus TCU. Oh, in the Pinstripe Bowl. Wisconsin Badgers. Starting to decline? Starting to fall in the projections? I think so. The Pinstripe Bowl. In New York, Wisconsin versus Syracuse. Syracuse starts the season 4-0, and they got a big game coming up in a couple weeks. Notre Dame and Oklahoma in the Cheez-It Bowl. This was last week's projection at Action Network. It was Notre Dame versus Texas. Texas lost. They fell down in the bowl projections. It's replaced by Oklahoma, who just lost to Kansas State. Notre Dame versus Oklahoma. That would sell some tickets in Orlando, Florida. The Alamo Bowl, Baylor versus Utah. I don't have to say it, but I'll say it. Both these teams, their fan bases, are dreaming bigger than the Alamo at this point. Utah still have their eyes on the Rose Bowl, and Baylor still looking at New York Six Bowl. Maryland, Pittsburgh, and the Mayo Bowl. I think this is what, actually, I would not use a pencil. I would pen this in. This is Maryland, Pittsburgh, perfect spot. Mayo Bowl, Charlotte, North Carolina. Wake Forest, UCLA in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. UCLA 4-0. Big game against the Washington Huskies at home this Saturday. It's a swinging gate game for the UCLA Bruins. I've got Washington winning that game. I got them covering the spread. But if the UCLA Bruins can pull out a win, they'll be going to a bigger bowl than the Sun Bowl, in my belief. UCLA, Wake Forest just lost a tough game to Clemson. But if they rebound, they can also go to a higher bowl than the Sun Bowl. But that would be a good game. North Carolina State versus Florida in the Gator Bowl. Projected here on September 28th by Action Network's Brett McMurphy. Gator Bowl, North Carolina State, Florida. Of course, I've got North Carolina State in the Orange Bowl. I've got them beating Clemson this week. We'll see what happens. North Carolina State, Florida would be a great Gator Bowl. Eastern Michigan, San Diego State in the Arizona Bowl. Eastern Michigan's already went to Arizona this year in the state of Arizona as they upsetted Arizona State. This is Eastern Michigan, San Diego State in the Arizona Bowl, according to these bowl projections. We go to the Music City Bowl, Michigan State, LSU, Michigan State. Are they going to make the Music City Bowl? Are they going to win 2 more games this year? I don't think they're going bowling. I don't think they're going ball, and they've had so many injuries. Their secondary is not good. They're the worst in the country, or one of the worst in the countries. I don't think Michigan State's going to make it here to the Music City Bowl, but that's the projection right now by Action Network. Texas A&M and Iowa on January 2nd. That would be a very low-scoring game, very defensive game. Minnesota, Ole Miss in the Citrus Bowl. Of course, us Golden Gophers, we're looking for the Rose Bowl. This would be a good consolation prize. Ole Miss, Minnesota. Woo, there'd be a lot of running the ball in that game. That'd be a quick game. That'd be over in less than 3 hours. Gophers, Ole Miss, Citrus Bowl. We're looking at Pasadena. Clemson, Tennessee in the Orange Bowl. Of course, we have peek around the corner. We have North Carolina State in this game, but we'll find out this Saturday, won't we? We'll find out. North Carolina State versus Clemson. Clemson, Tennessee in the Orange Bowl. Oklahoma State, Kentucky in the Sugar Bowl. I would agree with that. How things stand right now, Oklahoma State, Kentucky in the Sugar Bowl. But again, we have Baylor peek around the corner defeating Oklahoma State this Saturday. If that happens, this would switch around. Baylor would be projected in the Sugar Bowl. The Cotton Bowl. Washington is moving on up. Washington Huskies moving on up, playing Cincinnati in the Cotton Bowl. According to these projections, Cincinnati once again gets to a huge bowl game. Beautiful job by Luke Fickell. That program is humming. USC, Penn State in the Rose Bowl. Boo, we've got Minnesota here at peek around the corner. But according to Brett McMurphy's Action Network, it's USC, Penn State in the Rose Bowl. And of course the playoffs, and everyone has them. We had this projected at the start of the season. Now everybody has it. Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, however combination you want to use. Brett McMurphy's got Buckeyes, Crimson Tide, Wolverines versus the Bulldogs. And he's got an all-SEC championship game, Georgia versus Alabama. Don't have any faults with that at all. We have Alabama versus Ohio State. Okay, now, let's get to the story. Let's get to this ACC dissolution and what would it look like. Let's try to just connect the dots. Again, we have peek around the corner. Your host, Greg Pflugar. Don't believe this is going to happen. Not a big believer, right? Don't think it can happen. But we talk about things here at Peek Around the Corner that we even don't believe. But we talk about everything. And again, we had an article come out last week from the News and Observer. We're going to get to it right now. And it talks about how Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director of North Carolina, with some text messages to the UNC Chancellor Gusowich. These text messages were produced by the News and Observer per FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, Public Record Act. Okay, we've talked about this column a few episodes ago in relationship to Bubba Cunningham talking with Jim Delaney. But now we're going to hit once again this theory of ACC dissolution because some ACC leaders keep implying it, keep talking about it among themselves. So we have to talk about it here at Peek Around the Corner. Let's get right to the story. Again, this is the News and Observer. This was published a week ago. Andrew Carter. We're going to skip most of it. We talked about some of this article in a previous episode in and around Bubba Cunningham talking to Jim Delaney. Now, I'm going to read this. Patience and planning. We skipped a few paragraphs. Here. This is, just to go back a second, this is text message conversation between Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director of North Carolina, to Gusowich, the UNC Chancellor of North Carolina, on the night of June 30th. Now remember everybody, Bubba Cunningham is a long-season athletic director. He's been the athletic director of North Carolina since 2011. He knows all of what goes on in the ACC. He knows about the grant of rights. He knows how tough it is to get out. He knows all the issues. Keep that in the back of your mind when we go over what he said to the Chancellor of North Carolina after his discussion with Jim Delaney on June 30th, the night that it's announced that USC and UCLA are joining the Big Ten. We're going to go to the patience and planning part of the article. We're going to skip down to one paragraph, the second paragraph. The article. For UNC and other ACC schools, there is little choice then but to follow the advice Delaney provided Cunningham in their long talk over the summer. Patience and planning, quote unquote. In his text message conversation with Gusowich on June 30th, Cunningham went over how Phillips was likely to address the ACC presidents and chancellors during their conference call the next morning. One of the talking points, as Cunningham described it, should we explore a partnership with the Big 12 or the Pac-12? Gusowich, now this is what Cunningham believes Phillips is going to talk about. Let's get something very clear because I've seen other people make this mistake. Phillips himself is not talking. The commissioner of the ACC is not discussing ACC dissolution or implying it in any way, fashion. His job is to represent all 14 full members of the ACC conference, the 14 institutions, and Notre Dame partially when it comes to sports outside of football and men's hockey. So this is nothing to do with Phillips talking about dissolution. Let's keep that clear. This is Bubba Cunningham saying to Gusowich in a text message what he believes Phillips will likely talk about, which is to explore a partnership with Big 12 or Pac-12. Let's continue. Gusowich, UNC Chancellor, was intrigued. We could have a super conference, both athletically and academically, he responded. Probably would need to be called the Atlantic Pacific Athletic Conference. Maybe that's crazy, but it would get us a better TV deal. It may be worth considering. So, Cunningham thinks this is what Phillips is going to talk about, a possible merger with Big 12 or Pac-12. And Gusowich comes back and says, this is kind of cool to think about. Maybe this is a name. If it gets us a better TV deal, if we could rip up this current TV deal with ESPN, could be worth considering. Bubba Cunningham goes back to Gusowich, texts back to Gusowich and says, we need to think about what outcomes we want. Cunningham wrote back, what are our priorities here at UNC? Do we want to maintain all teams in the ACC? Do we want to maintain all teams in the ACC? This is the North Carolina's athletic director, long-time athletic director. And he was athletic director for schools before North Carolina. He knows his job, he knows his duties, and he knows the ACC inside and out. He goes back and says to his Gusowich, what are our priorities? Do we want to maintain all teams in the ACC? Is this a new league? Do we want to have the same number of teams at each school? Do we want to have the same number of teams at each school? That's a weird... Basically, he's saying, should all schools in this whatever league is going to be, should sponsor the same amount of teams? I think that's what he's getting at there. Should we play a national schedule or a regional schedule? Okay, we're going to finish this off, then we're going to go back to that very intriguing paragraph of Cunningham going back to Gusowich. At UNC, those were some of the questions of the day. The day after the Big Ten news broke, the ripples were only beginning, the implications only just beginning to be understood. Almost 3 months later, the speculation has quieted some. The ACC demise perhaps doesn't appear imminent. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about other things. So, going back to this paragraph. Cunningham going back to Gusowich. We need to think about what outcomes we want at UNC. What are our priorities? Do we want to maintain all teams in the ACC? In other words, letting some ACC teams go? How can you read that any different? Do we want to maintain all teams in the ACC? The only way you can not maintain all teams in the ACC is to have dissolution, to vote for dissolution. There's no other way. That grant of rights. Now, the theory is if you get 8 votes, you can dissolve the conference, which dissolves the GOR, the grant of rights, because there is no conference to own the grant of rights. There's a whole lot of smart people out there who says this still will not destroy the grant of rights, even though the conference doesn't exist. Dissolution is not a possibility. In the ACC bylaws that have been produced in public, there is no part that none of us have seen that goes step by step on how to dissolve a conference. Therefore, in the theory of dissolution, it would go back to the North Carolina state laws that says basically a simple majority. That's why when people talk about the theory of dissolution of the ACC, we always get back to the number 8. It would take 8 votes to dissolve the conference. So when Cunningham says, do we want to maintain all teams in the ACC? Cunningham knows the grant of rights. He knows the teeth of the ACC grant of rights. So what Cunningham is talking about is dissolution, the theory of dissolution. Now this was June 30th. The night of June 30th, Cunningham is talking to Gusowich. Then we have here, on August 21st, Florida State's president says Seminoles will be very aggressive in conference realignment. We talked about this article back in August, a month ago. You can read this. This is at Fan Nation. We're not going to be going through this article, but basically the Florida president, not just the athletic director, but the president of Florida State at a Tallahassee Chambers of Commerce meeting. People were there. They reported on it. This is Dustin Lewis' article on August 21st. Other people were there. There's other people who tweeted about it, saying the Florida president saying Seminoles will be very aggressive in conference realignment. How would you be aggressive in conference realignment? You are stuck under the GOR, the grant of rights. There's nothing that Florida State can do. They can't join the SEC. They can't join the Big Ten. We've heard reports, separate reports from Brett McMurphy at Action Network talking about how Big Ten would have interest in Florida State, something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing. Florida State, Miami, Florida, and then he included the Pac-12 teams, Oregon, Washington, Stanford. These schools would be targeted and possible more expansion in the Big Ten years down the road. But how does Florida State get out from the GOR? The president talks about how I'm spending a lot of time and we're getting a lot of help. President McAuliffe on FSU conference affiliation. It's something I'm spending a lot of time on and we're getting a lot of help. The president of Florida State is spending a lot of time on conference affiliation. Why? How? Again, we get back to ACC dissolution. We're connecting the dots here, right? From North Carolina's athletic director talking to North Carolina's chancellor on June 30th, to Florida State's president discussing this in the third week of August, saying we're being aggressive, extremely aggressive in conference realignment. I'm spending a lot of time on and we're getting a lot of help on conference affiliation. It all circles back to one crazy theory of dissolution. So let's speculate. Again, put your comments down in the comment section below the video. What would ACC dissolution look like? It would take 8 votes. Who would be those 8 schools to vote on dissolution? Maybe, when we talk about ACC dissolution in the past, we've talked about how, 8 schools would need to vote, if they would only vote on dissolution if they would have a safe landing spot with SEC or the Big Ten. But maybe this voting 8 votes for ACC dissolution is not about making sure, about having a landing spot in the Big Ten or the SEC. Maybe dissolution of the ACC is all about just forming a new league without all the ACC schools remaining. And with those 8 or 9 ACC schools perhaps being open to bringing on maybe a few of the Big 12 schools, or having this super duper conference with the Pac-12. We don't think that's possible, but again, they talked about it on June 30th. Florida State's president's talking about being aggressive in conference affiliation, spending a lot of time on it, getting a lot of help on it. So what would this look like? Well, first of all, let's go through the schools. Obviously, you would have to include North Carolina. We just went through that article. Big member of the ACC, North Carolina. Of course, we're going to include Florida State, obvious reasons. We're going to include Miami, Florida, obvious reasons. Clemson, those are 4 schools. And then I would include Virginia, longtime ACC school, connected with North Carolina in so many ways, particularly around the leadership of the ACC. Virginia, that's 5 schools. North Carolina, Florida State, Miami, Florida, Clemson, Virginia, that's 5. I would not include Notre Dame in this. Yes, according to this theory, Notre Dame would get a vote. But you got to understand, for years, ACC presidents, athletic directors, commission, everyone's trying to get Notre Dame in the ACC vote. They're not talking about, they're not saying to Jack Swarbrick, hey, could you vote for dissolution of the ACC? This is not, I don't determine Notre Dame would have a vote in this ACC. They would have a vote, but they're not part of this effort if this is truly what's going on. So we're going to push Notre Dame's vote aside. So we have 5 schools: North Carolina, Florida State, Miami, Florida, Clemson, Virginia. Well, if you're going to have a vote of dissolution of the ACC to form a new league, North Carolina needs North Carolina State, and Virginia needs Virginia Tech. You need the public schools of those states in that vote. They would have to be included, in my opinion. Again, put down your thoughts in the comment section below the video. So that's 7 schools. The 8th school, I would say would be Duke, a private school. Because the value of Duke or North Carolina, you would need that value. I know basketball isn't worth anywhere near as much as football, but I think Duke would be included, longtime member. Duke would be that 8th school. And possibly you could add Louisville as the 9th school. But Wake Forest, private school, I don't think would be in this. Boston College, Syracuse, Pittsburgh, Georgia Tech, I don't think any of them would be included in this. That's just my wild speculation on a wild theory. So what would an ACC dissolution look like? You got UNC talking to Florida State, talking to Miami, all of them talking, continually talking, saying if we can't get a better deal from ESPN, let's vote to dissolve this conference and we create a new conference. I believe North Carolina State and Virginia Tech will be part of this. I'm sure many of you disagree, but I just think the entanglement of those state schools, North Carolina and Duke and Virginia, voting on dissolution and having North Carolina State and Virginia Tech on the outside, I think it would just get way too messy. This is going to be messy anyways if this crazy theory ever happened. Again, we're talking about ACC dissolution and this crazy theory. The dots, you can see they're being connected. It started on the night of June 30th with Cunningham talking to Gusowich in North Carolina. And obviously, Florida State's president has been talking about this. And I'm sure others have been talking about this. In the ACC leaders talking about this potential crazy theory of dissolution if ESPN doesn't improve their contract. So we are talking about it here at Peek Around the Corner. Wow. Can't believe we're talking about this again. But this News and Observer article that came out last week, well, here we are today. Again, put down your comments in the comment section below. Thank you for joining us here at episode 61. Until next time, from all of us at Peek Around the Corner to all of you, please, you all take care of each other. Thank you so very much.